USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. A look at this weekend in college hockey and a review of the top news of the week.
Welcome to USCHO Weekend Review for Monday, October 25th, 2021. I'm Ed Trefzger along with Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. Well, I guess being number one in the USCHO poll is like being on the cover of Sports Illustrated, if anybody remembers magazines. Michigan, the third team to lose a game in their first weekend, is number one this season. We saw UMass lose to Minnesota State. Minnesota State then lost to St. Cloud. And Michigan at Yost Ice Arena lost to Western Michigan. Well, first of all, should there be a new number one? And we're just seeing some of the ballots come in right now. It's going to be pretty close between St. Cloud State and Michigan. Who should be number one?
My vote went for St. Cloud State. Obviously they win this weekend. That helps, right? But then you just look at the fact that they've had a really tough schedule to this point. And despite the fact that they've got a couple of losses in their resume, I have no problem with that. They're playing really good hockey. And listen, Michigan's right there too. I don't mind either one of those two being anointed as number one, because, and even you can go back and put Minnesota State back in there. They didn't play this weekend, but they still had such fantastic results in a very tough schedule leading into this off weekend. So I have no problem saying that either one of those. I might even be able to find a way to make a case for Minnesota Duluth to be number one. It's easy for me right now to say that any of those teams could be number one. The one thing I will say is that one person that kept giving a vote to Denver, I hope he is now kind of taking a step back and saying, maybe not. Maybe it's not Denver as the number one team.
Yeah, you know what? The jinx of the Madden cover. I mean, you look at everything that went on, and it's just been. I mean, Jimmy, you last week were talking about Michigan going undefeated. So I mean, now look what you did. You went and did that, the whole thing. I don't know. I think that if I was voting, which I used to do, I still might have Michigan there this week. They did beat the number one team head on, and I think that's a case for it. They've got a couple. Everybody's got a loss at the top end that we're talking about in that area. So I think I might still go with Michigan number one, but obviously the voters are jinxing the number one. If Minnesota or St. Cloud, who plays, I believe they play St. Thomas this weekend, if they drop, then we got a big problem.
We're going to talk about St. Thomas in a little bit as they got their first Division I win. How about Western Michigan, though? I know that's a program near and dear to your heart, Derek. A pretty good weekend for them. Yeah,
obviously a new coach, new ideas, new thoughts. Pat's probably let him open up a little bit more than Andy Murray has. And I played with Pat for 3 years, and he's been a really good assistant coach for that program, and then to go with the Detroit Red Wings, and obviously to be able to see that program compete at that high level. I don't know if they're technically probably could be a little bit of an argument to probably somebody throw them a first place ballot or so, because they did beat the man, and we'll see where that comes out. But congratulations to Western Michigan on beating the number one, and obviously starting off really well, and going from there.
One thing that impressed me the most on Friday night was not jumping out to a 3-0 lead, but as soon as Michigan finally got on the board and responded, they had a response right after. I think it was less than 2 minutes, or right around 2 minutes later, they scored a goal to go back up 4-1. And if there's anything that when you're playing a high potent offense that can kind of knock that team down, it's when they finally punch you and then you punch them right back in the face. And I thought that was what Western did so well on Friday night. And it'll be interesting when they get into NCHC play. Where do they fit in this whole juggernaut? You've got a North Dakota team, you've got a Denver team, you've got a Minnesota Duluth team that people have been talking about. Obviously, we've talked a lot about St. Cloud State. So put those 4 teams in there. Imagine the fact that one of those 5 teams won't even get home ice in the playoffs this year. Those are some good teams we're talking about. They're all really, teams that we believe belong in the top 10, top 15 of the country right now. And one of those teams won't even get home ice in their own conference playoffs.
And you know what? That's the biggest thing about, you talked about the pushback, and that's the biggest thing, a coach, when you give up a goal, you want to always have a response right back. And we always had a rule. We called it a 2-minute rule. You never want to give up a goal in the first 2 minutes of the period or the last 2 minutes of the period or 2 minutes after you scored, because you felt that you've taken the momentum of, those are big momentum points in a game. And, like you said, as soon as Michigan scored, Western pushed them right back, and to come away with a big win like that, and huge crowd at Lawson Arena. It's always an intimidating place to play, and like I said, good for Western Michigan on that end.
When we talk about parity across college hockey, one of the things that we've mentioned before in the past couple of years is all the tools coaches have now to prepare for opponents, not just video of games like the old days, mailing around VCR tapes or whatever, but really detailed video of other teams. How important is that to preparing for other teams, and how much is that a factor in how close everybody is in competition?
Well, it's huge. I'm from the era of an assistant coach where you had to go deck to deck, VCR, push play, hit record, hope that there isn't static. You let it run for 2 hours. Then you do it for the other, and you do it 2 weeks in advance, and then you run down and have to mail it out overnight. I mean, now there's just so much technology. You can go back and watch every game. You can go back and watch every player's shifts from previous weekends if you want to isolate on a certain player. It's big. I mean, we did, our system the last couple of years at Robert Morris. We would do power play video, which would be watching their penalty kill on Tuesday. We'd flip it on Wednesday, and then we'd watch all the rest of their stuff on Thursday. And we felt that we would want to keep the days of keeping people into 30-minute, 40-minute video sessions aren't there anymore, because you got to struggle to keep their attention. Just like in short bursts, just like Jimmy only wants to go 40 minutes this week instead of 60 minutes on the podcast. So you got to keep people's attention in short bursts. And with that, we try to keep it under about 7 minutes each one. So you go 7 minutes on Tuesday, 7 minutes on Wednesday, 7 minutes on Thursday. And then you'd have to go video on Saturday morning too. And you wanted them to digest everything. So the longer you went, the less that they paid attention. So you really had to make sure that you're short, you're concise, and showing, because you can have information overload if you do too much. But to your point, it's a very good tool right now to be able to scout people and, watch as many games as you want. I remember when we went to the NCAA tournament, we had to agree to exchange 5, 6, 7 games with Minnesota. And I was like, why do they want that many games? Because, they're just looking for something. Now you got everybody, every game. So it's, I don't know, sometimes it is too much, but you get them prepared. That's for sure.
First, Derek, I'm going to say that I'm old enough, and I know you are. I still remember as a student equipment manager being sent to the TDO, the Boston Garden, the old Boston Garden, during a Beanpot game, so that I could exchange tapes with one of the assistants from some other school that just happened to be going to the game that night. I mean, that's old school. But hey, how much does the current technology help for individual coaching? Like that you could, maybe cut 5 or 6 clips that you want to just show your defenseman, and you can maybe email that to them or let them look at it, or you can sit down separately with them. So you don't have that 40-minute video session that just becomes too much.
Well, you've got, within probably a half hour to an hour after the game, each player's got the ability to go watch their shifts individually on their own. So you could put notes on that. You could do voiceovers. You can do a lot of different things to try to help them to where you don't have to sit down and have an individual meeting. But sometimes you have to sit down and just show them stuff. But they've got the ability right when the game's over to watch their shifts. And then we've got the ability to see how many of them watch their shifts. And it's always interesting to see people where they've only watched, logged into the thing 1 or 2 times. And that's after they've played a poor game. So it's, I'll even take you one step further, Jimmy. I'm old enough to remember before there was video exchange, you'd have to get somebody in the local area to sneak a video camera into the games to potentially video some games that weren't being shared out there. So there's nothing like the good old days of being sneaky.
Let me ask you one more about a 2-game series. So take Michigan and Western Michigan. You're the coach preparing for the next night. How do you approach it after you've won and after you've lost? Who has the advantage in preparing for the next night?
Well, you always want to win the first night, because I think that takes a lot of pressure off your pre-scout and your meeting in the morning. But you've got to find some stuff that you can do better. You want it to be teaching. You don't want to be, if you win, you want to do a lot of teaching, things that you had problems with, and you want to give them something to lean on. You do maybe a minute clips at the end of all your goals, or big saves, or big blocks, stuff that helped you win. And you keep that. If you lose, then you've got your meeting takes a completely different tone. Obviously, you gave up some goals that cost you, and you want to show a little bit of those, of how you did things better, how you need to do things better the night before, as well as tendencies. And then you've got to try to get them in a positive mindset coming out of it. I always used to, when I was a young assistant coach, I always thought that if you had to split, winning the second game was better. But then as a head coach, you realize that winning the first game is better, because there's a lot less pressure on Saturday, because you've already got the job done. And I really think that every meeting takes on a different tone depending on how the game before went. And there are 2 different tones to your Saturday morning meetings, that's for sure.
Well, let's turn to another series in the West, a sweep by Minnesota Duluth over Minnesota. Probably not a big surprise, but Minnesota fans have got to be scratching their heads a little bit, maybe a little bit disappointed.
13-3-2 since the WCHA has been disbanded. Minnesota Duluth. That's as one-sided as they come. And you go down the list, and the Gophers still have a 135, 85, and 18 all-time record. But if there's a one-sided domination right now, that's Minnesota Duluth. And it's surprising to see that score, but then when you hear the results, it's not surprising. And then it's surprising to hear the previous results. So it's for an in-state rival, that's as one-sided as it comes right now.
I guess there is a part that surprises me, because I keep hearing about how good this Minnesota team is. They just don't seem to be proving it. If anybody, I believe if I remember right, the coaches picked Minnesota over Michigan this year in the Big Ten. If you're going to tell me that this team is that good, they need to be winning some games that matter. And these were 2 games that matter against an opponent where you've now got a mental block, right? It's whether these players have been there for the whole time, and obviously they haven't been there for all 18 of those games that you mentioned, Derek. But these players have to have a mental block, and that should have been what the hurdle was to overcome. Hey, if we win these games this weekend, these are big games, guys, because we just need to prove to ourselves that we can do it. Well, now you've not proven to yourselves. And does this carry on into league play, where you're now questioning everything about how good this team is? Are you questioning the makeup of this team? That kind of is what runs through my head is, does Minnesota know what they have right now? And do they really have as good of a team as they probably thought they did when the season began?
And a mental block, especially. We had a scenario against Sacred Heart where we went 25 in a row without losing. We tied the first one, and then won 24 in a row. And we would find the silliest ways to win. 0.1 second left in overtime, get outshot 50 to 12 and win 2-1. And then finally, when they came through, I remember that, and and everybody knew it. I mean, it was when it got to about 20, everybody, even our players, were like, "They've never beat us," and and then when they finally came through and they swept us a couple times after that. I mean, it was almost like they got over the mental hurdle of it, and it's almost like somehow Minnesota needs to win a big game against them. And like you said, I think they're really good. I wouldn't be surprised to see Minnesota in the final 8 at the end. But it's go time. We're going into November here soon.
Well, there was a big East-West matchup over the weekend that ended in a split, and also Denver came east. We'll look at those and some other things as we continue. You're listening to the USCHO.com Weekend Review Podcast.
This is the USCHO Weekend Review Podcast from US College Hockey Online.
Welcome back to the USCHO Weekend Review Podcast. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. Quinnipiac and North Dakota, a split on the weekend, really lived up to some of the advanced hype and a matchup of two teams that are going to be in the mix right at the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of asked for the schedule maker this year has been unbelievable from top to bottom of this month of October. And these are NCAA tournament games. You got teams going east to west, and I know that you had Denver going out east. I mean, these are some big games, and to be able to have I think we touched on a little last week, to be able to have North Dakota come into your building as Quinnipiac, that place had to be rocking. And then to leave with a split. It's always good to split when you go on the road, especially the travel. So I would give the nod to North Dakota. Split. You want to split on the road and sweep at home, and North Dakota got the job done.
And it was that difficult type of split that we were talking about before the break. You lost the first game. Now your back's against the wall. You have to win the second game. And obviously North Dakota did that, a 3-1 victory, and great goaltending performance, to end up with, I believe it was 35 saves that Zach Driscoll made in net for North Dakota. I mean, that's a pretty strong game. And, Rocking House in Hampshire, I think they had 34-98 the first night, 35-12, which I know that's a little over capacity. I mean, I was looking right up to the morning of the game. People were still trying to sell their tickets on StubHub and make money, but I think that all of them were gone by game time both nights, which is pretty impressive. People wanted those tickets. There was a high demand, and good for Quinnipiac getting North Dakota to come east. They don't do that often. And I hope we see more of it. I love seeing these Western teams. I called the Lowell Michigan State game on Friday night. And it's just great to see the coaches that you don't see that often. And, the next one I know we're going to talk about is Denver, to see Denver coming east. I mean, these are the teams that fans kind of clamor for. They want to see these teams out east.
Teams have been doing a good job of getting the other teams to go in their buildings. I mean, look at Bentley. Bentley has had Boston College and Ohio State in their building. I mean, good on the teams for getting them there, and good on the teams for going on the road.
Denver went on the road, ended up winless, but what a third period for Providence. Down 4-1 and 5-4. The Friars score 5 goals in the third period to win that. They also took UNH on Sunday, so a good weekend for them. Denver, that close game, and then a tough loss, a big loss to BC after Boston College lost the night before to Colorado College, and we'll mention CC in a moment. Denver, Providence, pretty good contest. What do we take away from the weekend for Denver and Providence and BC also?
Well, I'll start with Denver, and they're probably, licking wounds a little bit. You have a 4-1 lead going into the third period. You're supposed to close that game out, and it looked like they might have survived because they gave up 3 goals in the first 4 minutes, and you're saying, oh boy, here we go. And the crowd wasn't a capacity crowd in Providence, but in terms of Providence home crowds, it wasn't bad. And you could see it on TV. They were loud. They were into the game. But then, a great response by Denver. They find a way to take the lead back on the power play. And then Providence somehow had another punch back. So I'll tell you, the one thing I take away from this is Providence is not a joke. Despite the fact that they went into a tough icebreaker tournament the week before and came away without a win, they were hungry and they completed it this weekend. That comeback on Friday, then the Sunday win up in New Hampshire. That's a fantastic weekend for Providence. And Denver, I think, I know you can't really figure out who's going to win what games and stuff like that, but you're coming off a tough loss. You need to bounce back, and you're playing a very hungry Boston College team that just dropped games to Bentley and Colorado College, 2 games I think that they really expected to win, and maybe their players didn't respond. That BC team came out firing on Saturday, and maybe not surprisingly, they got the result that they wanted. But for Denver, that's a long trip to make and go home with a couple of losses. hopefully for David Carl and his team, there's teachable moments. And I'm sure there are, especially out of that Friday night game. But it's still a tough weekend to go on the road and not be able to pull off any wins out of those two games in games that they probably felt that they probably gave decent efforts.
Yeah, those, talk about going into Lions Den as Denver. First of all, your psyche's got to be, after having a 4-1 lead going into third on Friday, your psyche's got to be really down and depressed. And, you talk about, as a coach, you celebrate losses for about 10 minutes, and you want to try to put you celebrate wins for 10 minutes, and you want to try to put losses behind you after 10 minutes. That had to be a tough one, especially against a really good opponent that's going to be at the top of Hockey East at the end. And then all of a sudden you go into Boston College and you think, oh, okay, we'll battle. And they're just hungry after losing to Bentley and Colorado College, two games that really could end up hurting them come later in the year when you talk about the P word pairwise. And, and then they come out and Boston College takes it to, gets the win over Denver. So interesting weekend with some powerhouse matchups. That's for sure.
Well, we talked about Colorado College, Kris Mayotte, his first win as a head coach. Also, Bill Riga, his first win at Holy Cross, a 3-0 open to that game at Bentley. They hung on to win 3-2. These are two longtime assistants who we expect are going to do a great job as head coaches.
Yeah, congratulations. You'll always remember your first one. And, there's always got to be something special about that. And that's one thing that you'll keep that puck forever, and you can never go and take that away from you. So congratulations to two young, longtime assistant coaches who paid their dues and now are head coaches. You really like to see that as a guy that grew up in the college game and promoted from an assistant coach to a head coach. You want to see assistant coaches and guys in college hockey get those jobs. You don't want to see guys coming back from, and nothing against them, but pro hockey guys, there's always this, you want that next generation of coaches and you want that next generation of assistants and to get those jobs. So congratulations to those guys. And you want some former college hockey head coaches potentially to get jobs eventually down the road as well.
You also now have just a couple of coaches that are looking for their first win this year. Ben Barr up in Maine came close a couple of times against Sacred Heart. They ended up with a loss, a 1-0 loss and a tie this weekend. And then Reed Cashman, who hasn't played his first game as head coach yet. He's been waiting for a long time. Obviously, he left the Caps 2 years ago and ends up at Dartmouth.
Went winless last year.
Winless, but they're also undefeated. So, I mean,
he's 500.
To have their season canceled out last year was a little strange. And I'll tell you, I thought he got his first win on Saturday night. I hadn't seen any denotation that their game against UMass was an exhibition game. So when I see a 3-2 win in regulation for Dartmouth, I'm saying, hey, Reed Cashman got his first win. Going to write about it on Saturday night on the USCHO front page. And the next thing you know, I go to the UMass account. They're claiming a 4-3 overtime win. It took me forever to realize that because it was an exhibition game, they played regulation out. Then they decided to play an entire 5-minute 3-on-3 overtime. UMass loses 3-2 in regulation, but then scores 2 goals in this suddenly derived 5-minute overtime. They're posting that they won. I talked to one administrator and he said, I think these teams are taking these exhibition contests against one another a little bit too far. So I do think that Dartmouth's first win, not that far down the road, because I think that Reed Cashman has a pretty good team up there.
I agree with you. Reed's going to do a very good job. Another longtime assistant that, he took the route of going to the Capitals through Hershey and up to Washington, and Reed will do a good job. I've always enjoyed talking to him. He's a good guy, and he's not too far. I saw that as well. I'm like, oh, good for Reed. And then on the exhibition game. So tough break. We'll see if he can get the real one this week.
Somebody else who's going to be keeping a puck is Rico Blasi. The first win for St. Thomas, 5-2 over Ferris State. Interesting situation for Rico. 1999, age 27. There have been a few great coaches at age 27, and we can think of Jerry York starting at Clarkson at that age. Spent 20 years at Miami, a couple of years out of the game. Now a very different situation at 49. He's just a little over the edge where you could call him one of the young coaches, and he's starting a program from scratch. That's got to feel good to get that first win and start to build that D1 tradition there.
Number 399 career wins, and congratulations to Rico and Corey Leyland and Leon Hayward, Josh Johnson, Jamal Baraboo, everybody involved in that program. It's like I said, you'll always remember your first, but like you said, a different, top 25 all-time wins. That's a testament to him. I played college 4 years against Rico, coached against him numerous times. I think he had my number. I got him a couple times, but he had my number more than I had his. And, I got to know him really well, when he became head coach. And I like Rico a lot. I think he's going to do a good job. And those are other things that you constantly remember, and that staff will remember. I mean, to where they go 4 or 5 without getting their first one. So they got a long way to go to get up there, but they'll have some more milestones. That's the thing about starting a new program. You got milestones that you want to check. You want to check your first goal, your first win, your first conference win. There's a lot of things that you want to check, and you save a lot of pucks. Trust me.
What I think probably was nice to see for Rico and everybody involved at St. Thomas was that it was not one of those games that you were biting your fingernails. They took a 5-0 lead in that game and a 5-2 final. They had lost the night before in overtime. They had a close game last weekend against, I think it was Lake Superior. Obviously, they go back to the first weekend of the season. They get routed 12-2 the first night at St. Cloud State, and then lose a game 2-0 the second night against the same team, and played that one a lot closer. I feel like it's a team that's going to grow, and I know knowing Rico, like you do as well, Derek. He's not a guy that's going to sit back and just settle for mediocrity. He will build this program, and it will be a very good team. And I don't think it's going to take as long as you would think to build a program from scratch. He will recruit well. He will use everything that he has at his disposal to his advantage, and he will have this program up and running and moving in a good direction very quickly.
Well, let me ask you, Derek, about recruiting. We've talked in previous weeks about the transfer portal and so forth, but there is more talent out there from what I hear than there are positions on Division I teams. What is the recruiting landscape like right now?
Well, it's hard. I mean, it's hard for players to get spots because of players, backlogged, fifth-year guys, transfer portals. This is a challenging time. You could put together a really good team in a really short time. Look at LIU; they got really competitive quickly. You look at St. Thomas that Rico came in late and took. Are they going to have their bumps on the road? Absolutely, but there's a lot of good talent out there, and you need to go and you need to get some young guys too. I mean, there are some teams that took 7, 8 transfers this year, and we'll see how they end up doing as they go on. And but I think there's a lot of backlog. There's going to be still some more kids that are committed that aren't going to want to go back another year. There are going to be some kids that they don't have space for because of the fifth years. I mean, there's going to be there's going to be some kids that really pop up still that you got to save some money for the second half of the year. That's for sure. And when we talk here in a minute about surprises, I'll go a little bit more into that. One of my surprises of the year.
Well, why don't we head right into that? That's where we're going to end off here today. What about the biggest surprises so far this season?
I got 2. I got Colgate. Colgate really is, you look at what they've done, and I think they're really taking advantage of playing last year. And everybody kind of looked at the ECAC with 4 teams going, and I think they had the ability to play a lot. And they went to the final game against St. Lawrence in the 4-team playoff. But I think they've really taken this and run. So I think Donnie Bonds put together a really good team, and we'll see. To go and do what they've done. They're 5-2 right now. I really took note of their 8-3 win over Arizona State, which I think is an outstanding team. and to be able to do that at home. And then Arizona State really came back and got the overtime win on Saturday. And my other one, and it's not complete because of the record, but just who they beat lately is Sacred Heart. Sacred Heart's got a whole bunch of transfers that they brought in from different places, but they're 2-1-1 in their last 4 against Hockey East. They went into BU and they split there. They went up to Maine and won a tightly contested 1-0 game, as you mentioned earlier, Jimmy, and then tied after that. So, I mean, with the CJ and his staff, they knew what they needed. They needed to go out and get some players to change some things that they felt. And, with CJ and Scotty McDougall and Ryan DeRocha there, I really think that those guys have put themselves in a really good position heading into opening play of Atlantic hockey. They got to have a lot of confidence right now going 2-1-1 against those and all on the road against those Hockey East teams. So congratulations to Sacred Heart.
I did get to see Colgate last year, and it seems like they've made another step forward from what I saw last season. Just offensively, they can just transition and fly up the ice. And it seems like Don Vaughn has really built a team around really being aggressive offensively. And he's got great goaltending, too. So they could go a ways.
I assume you're looking for mine next.
Did I take all your thunder?
You took a little bit of it, but I'm going to go with Notre Dame because I thought that this might be a down year for Notre Dame. And thus far, just one loss. And more important, I believe that they're outscoring their opponents 20-8 in their 6 games that they've played or 5 games that they've played. That's an important thing for the Fighting Irish, because I think we were on this podcast last week and I was talking about that they're really good front runners. So if they can get a lead, that's a team that can just bury you. Their one loss to RIT Thursday night came in overtime. So even when you look at the pairwise implications of that one loss, it's only a 55%, 45% split. So you're not taking a massive loss. It's not like you lost in regulation. So I'm looking at this Notre Dame team saying that they have a lot of the tools and they seem to be, able to reload at some of their key positions. And if you can reload in college hockey, we talk about it all the time. If you can go back and go to the well and find more good recruits and make your, freshmen play, use the transfer portal right, you're going to be a good team. And that's, I think, what Notre Dame is this year.
Did we jinx everybody last week? I mean, we talked about all these teams. We talked about Denver not getting a lot of attention. They lose. We talked about Notre Dame not getting a lot of attention. They lost to RIT in overtime. We talked about Quinnipiac, and they split. I think the only one that we didn't jinx is Omaha, and I don't think they played. So the curse of us talking about you, nobody's going to talk to us anymore about their teams. I'm going to lose all my inside sources if we keep this going like this.
I want to add one thing to what Jim said about Notre Dame. That's a really deep team. When you have 2 of your fourth line guys on your first power play unit, you've got a lot of offensive ability there. And Jim's exactly right. Notre Dame jumped out to a 3-0 lead and just kept the foot on the gas till late in the game.
And Jimmy, it looks like we're going to keep this under 40 minutes. So
I like it.
The time of like Betamax and VHS here. We're going to keep this down.
Yeah, we don't have to tell the podcast listeners to flip over the tape or whatever.
Press pause.
Well, there you go. You can press pause and listen to the rest on the way home, right?
Now we're going to rename this podcast to 3 really old guys talking hockey.
Oh, speak for yourself. I feel like 51 going on 31.
Okay, Betamax.
Yeah. Well, with that, I think we'll wrap it up for this week. Check out all our podcasts from USCHO at uscho.com/podcast. For Jim Connelly, for Derek Schooley, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Weekend Review Podcast, a production of US College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.